The Enchanted Delta, Razia Khan. Years spent reluctantly abroad had given Selina a strange xenophobia. England bored her, China left her cold. Like the wrinkles on an aging mother's face, she knew the shortcomings of her place of birth only too well. In spite of all the poverty and backwardness, this was the land which belonged to her, and this was the earth to which she herself belonged. This had been established inexorably and unequivocally. No one could alter this fact. Before setting her foot in England, Selina had been a keen Anglophile. English food, English etiquette, and English literature had been her passions. She was still addicted to all three phenomena, but there had been a certain cooling off. Before going to England, she had not heard the northern accent, nor seen the dark, dusty, gloomy houses of the East End in London and the northern countries, nor tasted the contempt with which dark skinned people were treated there. Reading Shaw's Pygmalion, she knew that the London Cockney dropped his eights, but the northern dialect, when she actually heard it, convinced her that parts of England could be as rustic as her good old native village Alfadanga, where she was born. During a Commonwealth gathering which she attended at Marlborough House, some English people betrayed such a poor knowledge of world affairs that she was reminded of Matthew Arnold's abusive epithet given to his own countrymen. He had taken the biblical word Philistine to meaning everything obtuse, insensitive, and gross. In spite of this, when Selina developed a crush for a handsome Englishman, his incapacity to match her emotional intensity and intellectual depth made her think of Foster's theory of the undeveloped heart of the Englishman. Sitting with him on a May morning among a riot of flowers in the Kew Gardens, she pointed her folded parasol at the rhododendrons and said with great enthusiasm, "They are my favorite poet's favorite flowers." "Lord, aren't they? Now, who is your favorite poet?" Selina pouted her lips in a deep huh. "I bet it is the poet laureate John Bethman." Selina walked away from him impulsively. "You can be quite rude, you know. I don't care if I am." As she looked at him, she saw a kind of incomprehension in his eyes. The word obtuse formed in her mind, but she did not utter it. She liked him for his bass voice, his love of Eastern people, his respect for their religions and civilizations. He also had very delicate and beautiful hands. She wanted to make amends. She bent over his face and whispered, "Don't ever mention the poet laureate to me. Do you hear? Royal patronage is the last thing a poet should seek." "But they all do." "My favorite poet didn't. He was a king by his own right. He gave up his knighthood given by the British when they insulted his countrymen. Aren't you a little," he stammered in his exaggerated Oxford accent, "aren't you a little obsessed with this chap? Who is he? Do I know him?" Selina was so exasperated that she could not speak. Swallowing the rising waves of anger, she said at last, "Who did I read the red oleander to? To a wall?" "Red oleander? Let me see. That's written by this chap. Now what's his name? Maeterlinck?" "My foot. He wrote the bluebird, not the red oleanders." Come, come, why do I have to work so hard to be able to talk to you? Why can't we just be happy and have some fun?" "Goodbye, and that's forever." She had started running, fuming with anger and disappointment. That was the last she had seen of Arthur. Selina had never felt inferior to anyone in life, neither to an Anglo-Saxon nor to a Caucasian. She left England in a hurry because she was afraid of developing a superiority complex and losing the brilliance of her mind. Constantly being underrated and considered sub-civilized, she did not know whether to laugh at the English or to pity them. She decided not to take their insular narrowness seriously. In defense In deference to great Englishmen and women of letters she adored, she left her course at Stratford upon Avon unfinished to come home. The only child of her dead parents, she enjoyed a measure of freedom which her acquaintances found enviable. They did not realize how lonely she was. The unfinished degree made it difficult to procure a job. She took to gardening. She realized with a pang how fortunate she was to inherit a garden and a house. Looking at the slums and the stifling apartments of low salaried clerks, house rents had gone up so much in the 80s that to have a house like the one she lived in, she would have to spend at least 50,000 takas. She was not hard up. Her parents, both renowned doctors, had set up a trust fund which looked after her needs very well. But she needed the right type of occupation and company, which were difficult to come by. On this April morning, she sat in the garden reading a letter. It had been delivered by hand an hour ago, but she was too busy to read it before. It said, Selina, we met in England. I had mentioned a serious plan which concerns you. Must say either yes or no. If you have no objection, could I discuss this over a cup of tea at your place at 4 p.m. today? At your place, if you don't mind. Regards, yours Maruf. Selina thought the note civilized enough. Perhaps she had misrated the man. She looked up at her Christian bearer Dominic, who was dusting the garden chairs, and said, You should have stopped the fellow who brought the letter. I know where he works. Just across the road. I can fetch him. Never mind. A guest is coming at 4. What have you got? Nothing much. Biscuits and leftovers from the chocolate cake you brought. It'll do. Dominic was the only household help she had. They both did their own cooking. She kept the house and garden clean and tidy for her. This arrangement was unusual and unsatisfactory by Bengali standards. No matter how ordinary the means, a cook and a maid were a must in every household. Order and punctuality were of no importance in the chaotic, hedonistic pattern of living here. Selina, addicted though she was to her land, was in many ways very un-Bengali in some of her habits and attitudes. She valued her privacy to such an extent that she disliked too many household workers and visitors prying into her life or sitting around while she worked constantly. For though she loved an occasional hour of languor, she could not sit still. Dominic was elderly and was not given to chatting and gossiping with next door household help. She considered this a blessing. Moreover, he was spotlessly clean. She did not have to order him about. She did his bit. He did his bit conscientiously and thoroughly and then took time to relax. She liked that and respected him for it. But no matter how harmonious and toothsome were, frequent reports of thefts and violence made Selina uncomfortable. She looked forward to Marv's visit with a eagerness which she never inspired in her in England. Every time Selina met Maruf there, Rupert was with her. Selina had spent a restful noon, which made her relaxed. She greeted Maruf with unprecedented warmth. Of medium height, he was wearing a light blue suit with a silver tie. Selina had noticed with dismay that the European suit had captivated Bangladesh. This heavy attire was totally unsuitable for the hot, humid summer months. A man of ordinary income sometimes spent his entire salary on the acquisition of a suit. Newsreaders on TV wore these regularly, sometimes in designs and combinations which were totally ludicrous. Selina considered this addiction unfortunate. She had made up her mind to be polite and courteous to her visitor. She avoided shaking hands with him, preferring the native salam. Maruf was a bit taken aback. He had failed to understand Selina's deep westernization juxtaposed with her love for purely Bengali customs and culture. He did not see how the two could go together. Maruf considered her smart, attractive, and modern. He looked around nervously and said in affected English, Nice house. Do you think so? Selina asked, deciding to be sophisticated rather than warm. She ignored his suit, totally unsuitable for this simple meeting, and was barely genial. I have just joined Nelson and Johnson's. They have given me a house not far from yours, and my car is chocolate, your favorite color. I noticed that. Kind of you to remember, Selina said with a thin smile. What happened to the Englishman? Selina understood perfectly whom he meant, but she decided to be on her dignity. Which Englishman? Mr. Rupert Smith, I believe that was his name. The smile on Marv's face broadened till it took on the nature of a leer. It put off Selina so much that she turned her eyes away from him and asked bitingly, "What exactly do you want to know about him?" "Please, please don't misunderstand me. I didn't mean to." Maruf was speechless. Selina fixed her eyes on the wedding photograph of her parents. 5 years ago, they had both died in a car accident. She was hardly 20. For months, she could not believe that they were gone forever. Always averse to leaving Bangladesh, she went to Europe reluctantly, slowly coming to terms with her grief. For a long time, Selina could not concentrate on her studies till she met the Shakespeare specialist Margaret Bradbrook, who persuaded her to take up a course on the Roman plays. Rupert, who was in the middle of his PhD on Coriolanus, had come to Stratford upon Avon the same time as Selina. Son of an English diplomat who had spent a great deal of time on the Indian subcontinent, he at once started cultivating the only girl in a sari in the institute. Maruf had come to Stratford with a group of friends during the Shakespeare season. He was carrying a gift parcel for Selina from her aunt in Dhaka. Selina took him to dinner at the Hathor Hotel where she was staying. Standing among a cluster of trees on Avenue Road, the Hathor was exclusive in many ways. Run by a baronet and his elegant wife, it was more like a fashionable home. Maruf, like Selina, was visiting Europe for the first time. But their circumstances were totally different. As the only child of two established doctors, she had many opportunities of going abroad, but she had resisted. Like the more vital sections of her compatriots, she had absorbed the soul of Europe without visiting it. Maruf, on the other hand, had been fascinated by European clothes, modern hit songs, and the glamorous women with bare legs. He also loved the smartness, the brisk pace of life, which left him breathless. His uncontrolled excitement was reflected in his face, in his furtive glances. Miss Bradbrook had remarked, "What an interesting name, Selina. You'd look quite at home here, as you have spent years in England." "I have just come for the first time," Selina said with a shy smile. "I'm glad to see that you are still in your sari." In deference to this renowned Shakespeare scholar, Selina smiled again. She fitted into English society naturally and unobtrusively, in spite of her native dress and reluctance to travel abroad. On the other hand, Maruf in his expensive suit and unnatural English looked totally out of place. He fell in love with the West and felt a slight contempt for Selina for expressing her homesickness so often. She would look at the pink plum blossoms in the garden of the Hator Hotel and sigh loudly. "What is troubling you?" asked Maruf. "I wish I was at home." Maruf suppressed his smile of derision. He had in his head a certain stock of words and phrases which were popular in English circles. "Backdated" was one of his favorite adjectives for describing people whom he considered below standard. Sir Hugh Gardiner, the baronet and owner of the Hathor Hotel, made fun of Selina's nonchalant calmness. "Look at this girl, behaving as if she is among a pack of barbarians." "So we are, Sir Hugh, compared to people of such older civilizations," said Rupert enthusiastically. He was already full of deep admiration for Selina, but everyone was not happy about the marked dignity and superior bearing of a dark-skinned creature from a backward country. Lady Gardiner had frowned between her perfectly penciled eyebrows. As she clipped her yellow and white roses with a pair of scissors, she remarked angrily, "Come, come, don't run us down like that, Rupert, old boy." Once Selina heard Lady Gardiner remark to her husband in a whisper, which was perfectly audible, "What makes that dark girl act so superior? Is she a Maharani or something? I thoroughly dislike her." Selina had come into the hall to collect the post. Lady Gardiner's contemptuous words froze her. It was then that she decided to leave the Hathor. Meeting Selina on the steps of the Shakespeare Memorial Theatre, Lady Gardiner was all smiles. I say, Miss Khan, that is a lovely sari. Not lovelier than your gown, answered Selina coldly. It was an engaging presentation of her favorite comedy, Much Ado About Nothing. Peter O'Toole and Dorothy Tootin were acting the roles of Benedict and Beatrice. Rupert sat next to her, trying to explain the humor of the comic scenes. Selina sat petrified with anger and then at last declared, Rupert, for God's sake, I know English. Look at the dumb audience. I feel I know it better than them. They don't laugh at all. I bet they don't know their Shakespeare. Did you hear that, Hugh? Hissed Lady Gardiner. You want to throw her out of England? Teased her husband. I certainly do. She ought to be declared a persona non grata. Have pity on the child. She lost her parents only recently. If you don't stop pampering her, I'll throw her out, declared Lady Gardiner resolutely. Everyone heard her. Rupert was outraged and walked out in protest. Selina followed and packed her things that very night. You are not leaving Stratford without a drink at the Dirty Duck, Selina. I'm not leaving Stratford. I'm only going to a less snobbish hotel. Goodbye, Hator. Rupert drove her down to the Regal Hotel where Maruf and his gang had put up. Next evening, Rupert organized a Bangladeshi night at his own hotel, the Globe. Selina, Maruf, and Rupert himself spoke about the new country which had appeared on the world map after a bloody guerrilla war, which lasted nearly 10 months. The British, who had actively supported the cause of Bangladesh, listened with enthusiasm. Their interest in her own country made her less angry with the British. Selina even accepted Lady Gardiner's invitation to tea at the Hator. She was surprised to see Lady Gardiner among the audience in the conference room of the hotel during the Bangladesh night. Sir Hugh winked at her affectionately and said, I have no prejudice against anyone, Selina. Yours must be a beautiful country. It is more beautiful than anything I have ever seen. You haven't traveled much, have you? I say your land must be pretty flat, said the baronet with a mischievous smile. Selina, suddenly ashamed of her chauvinism, bent her head. For Sir Hugh, that was an apology enough. He patted her shoulder and said, I like you very much for standing up for your own country. Reminiscing about their days in England, a wave of telepathy seemed to pass between Selina and Maruf as they sat face to face, sipping the light tea served by Dominic. Maruf liked his tea over strong. He merely licked the rim of his teacup as he thought of Sir Hugh, but he could not pronounce all English names. He could not say Hugh. He was one of those Bangladeshi men who had learned to make a tie knot reasonably well, but found it impossible either to speak English or Bengali with any measure of correctness. This was a deciding factor for Selina when Maruf asked, How is that old Englishman, the owner of the Ator? He is well. He writes occasionally. In spite of her decision not to entertain a proposal of marriage for Maruf, should he make one, Selina was sad when he left. The empty house, with only Dominic's quiet movement, seemed to threaten her with a silent menace. She took out her mother's blue Lancer reluctantly and drove to Rokeya Hall, the largest women's hostel of Dhaka University. In her graduate days, Selina had been vice president of the Hall Union. She hated driving in Dhaka. The traffic was chaotic. Young men were particularly nasty to lady drivers. These men did not follow any road rules. As she pulled out her gate, she saw the dirt piled on the roadsides. God knew when it would be cleared by the municipality vans. She paid a lot of taxes, of which the municipal tax was the highest. The waste bins, made of concrete, were broken. There was no concept of landscape gardening in Bangladesh. Even if there was, it could be seen only in army and navy areas or in ministerial mansions. The residential areas and city avenues were totally deprived of neat landscaping. As a result, Gulshan, one of the most posh areas of Dhaka, wore a shaggy look. In spite of the grand houses, the worst parts were the terminal areas between Gulshan and Qazi Nazrul Islam Road. A purposeless straggling crowd with a large percentage of beggars looked like heaps of enlarged ants, only minus the organized and purposeful movements of the ant community. Selina turned her face away in disgust. She felt her race was not good at building magnificent cities, nor in living in them in a civilized manner. They were from the soil and looked and behaved better when close to the soil. After all, Dhaka was nothing but a magnified village, with inmates who were basically rustic. Even when gathered in Hotel Shunargaon or the Sheraton, they looked pitifully villagey, in their ill-fitting suits and their overpainted spouses, in their garish saris, the way they handled instruments with an uncouthness which did not go with the imported and expensive cosmetics and perfumes they wore. At this point of her mental rambling, Selina scolded herself. These very people were potential manpower. If the upper crust of the society could be made to see the stupidity of their slavery to foreign fashion and their ludicrous imitation of foreign ways, they could be taught to be themselves. And if the poor and deprived could be employed, fed, and educated, they could do wonders. She was convinced of that. If the government could be led to save every hard earned penny for the betterment of these people, the entire picture would change. Priorities had not been pinpointed. How could hungry, roofless, ailing people be expected to watch football games and cricket in impressive stadiums? So it was clear that stadiums, fountains, and ugly, expensive murals should have been built after people had found homes, food, and medical care, let alone education. How could the leaders of such a poor nation sit in gilded chairs, like innumerable helicopter rides, in order to be shown on national television? The television itself was a slavish, wasteful medium of transmitting nonsense to starved people. Never had one seen such a colossal waste of airtime. Meaningless, outdated foreign stuff was displayed on it every single day. The most mediocre artists were made to sing and dance while gifted people were kept off. The freedom fighters who should have been absorbed in every important council and committee were also totally neglected and forgotten. Selina's parents had worked very hard. The affluence they enjoyed came from well used time and opportunities. They had not exploited anyone. They had also kept their family small. Why should she feel guilty for riding a beautiful car and living in a mansion all by herself? But she did. She felt uncomfortable every time she came out, seeing the difference between her well ordered life and the chaos outside for the nth time. Near the rail crossing at Mohakali, the traffic jam seemed insurmountable. Beggars, some crippled, some blind, thronged on both sides of the car, soiling the windows. She looked at the exhausted faces of the pedestrians deprived of proper pavements. Sweat streamed down Selina's face. She put up a special prayer for patience and drove on towards the hall. On the way, she impulsively stopped at the art buildings of the university. This is from where she had taken her first degree in sociology 4 years back. The place was more peaceful and civilized before. Now it was a veritable bedlam. Graffiti on the walls, bits of dirty paper strewn all over the campus. There were no flower beds, no sign of care or cleaning. Yet she knew there were a large number of cleaners and gardeners employed by the university. As vice president of the hall union, she had often come into contact with them. Most of these class 4 employees tried to get as many benefits as impossible without doing a stroke of work. Their superior usually pampered them with undeserved sympathy. They got away by doing nothing and engaged in faction mongering most of the time. The registrar's office and the women's hall maintained beautiful gardens, but the actual campus was ugly and dreary. Selina climbed the steps and entered the Bengali department on the first floor. She looked at the nameplates on the doors and spotted Nadim Ahmed's name on one. Selina knocked. Nadim, her erstwhile class fellow, who was now a lecturer in the Bengali department, opened the door with a frown between his eyes. He was a dark, handsome young man, belonging to different departments. Selina and Nadim had first brushed shoulders during a play, which was put up by the Dhaka University Students' Union at the Teacher Student Center. It was the Bengali version of Bernard Shaw's You Never Can Tell. The translation had been done by the martyred Professor Munir Chaudhuri. Selina and Nadim had immense fun rehearsing the acting. When the play was over, Selina felt a twinge in her heart. She met Nadim at the TSC luncheon hall the next day. Their lunching together had drawn so much attention that Selina ate as hurriedly as possible and went off to the library. During the meal, she felt Nadim had something important to say, but the entire ambience was hostile. She invited him to tea to her home, but before Nadim could come, the terrible accident had taken place. Today, her disappointment with Maruf made her want to see Nadim again. She knew he had taken his doctorate in comparative literature from the University of Austin and was perfectly capable of wangling a job abroad. But he had come back. Nadim's frown disappeared when he realized who it was. He caught hold of her hand and made her sit down, next to five tutorial students who were writing their assignments. The room was humbly furnished. It was small. Teachers who require more room to accommodate students were given these cubbyholes, while the vice chancellor and the officials of the registrar's office, ministers and secretaries, had huge rooms where trembling office assistants, clerks, and visitors stood in great awe and trepidation. A man of Nadim's talent surely deserved better than those half-baked, uncouth, power-loving secretaries who could neither speak English nor Bengali properly, leave alone writing in them. I can't believe it is you. After that terrible mishap, I went to your place only to find you unconscious. Soon after that, I had to go abroad. Selina, relieved to find him, smiled silently. Nadim was wearing white pajamas and an embroidered kurta over which there was a cream colored waistcoat of local coarse cloth known as khadi. His Kolhapuri chappals looked on the point of bursting. They were so old. Selina thought of Maruf's shiny suit and was filled with pleasure to hear Nadim's strong, beautiful English, which he seldom used with his compatriots. What are they riding on? Selina asked. On Tagore's novel, The Four Chapters. Ah, that stuff. I still can't figure it out clearly. Will you sit down with me one afternoon and give me your scholarly explanation of that difficult novel? By all means, when? Nadim asked with unhidden eagerness. Tomorrow. Tomorrow it is. Fine. 4:45. This was Selina's way of confessing her response. Nadim noted the time in his diary. She rose to go. He whispered at the door, I can hardly wait till tomorrow. Selina blushed, her entire body and soul trembling with unexpected joy. She drove to Rokia Hall, wondering why she had not thought of seeing him sooner. Seeing Nadim that morning had changed the entire aspect of Selina's life. Even in her student days, she had liked him. But he seemed greatly involved with three girls of the Bengali department. Sara, Mariam, and Anita were all attractive. Nadim was often seen with this interesting threesome under the proverbial peepal tree near the statue of the liberation fighters in Modhu's canteen in the TSC. He was heard talking to them, taking thorns out of their clothes, putting flowers in their hair. In the beginning, Selina had found this amusing, but after coming close to him during the play, she found the supremacy of the three disturbing. Selina withdrew in a huff. Her withdrawal put distances between her and Nadim. Once the engaging trio went on a shopping spree to Calcutta. It was during this break that she had dared to invite him to her house just before her parents' accident. She could not remember exactly what it was that he had said, which made her believe that his relationship with these three girls was entirely frivolous and of no consequence whatsoever. He merely enjoyed their company and conversation, but they were too superficial to steer him emotionally. Selina decided to turn a fresh leaf and enjoy the exhilarating turn of events. On the appointed afternoon, she met Nadim near the gate of her house. The entire entrance was smothered by a creeping madhobi, creeper bearing soft-scented pink-white blossoms. The flowers gave off a delicate scent which was not quite oriental. The fragrance was subdued, sophisticated like a French perfume. Before Selina could utter a word, Nadim broke a bunch of flowers and put them in her hair, ignoring Dominic, who had opened the gate. Finding Selina embarrassed, he said shamelessly, I think I have wasted enough time. Selina bent her head and suddenly thought of the kind of remark Rupert would make if he watched this quick on the uptake. I didn't expect you to blush like a Bengali belly, Nadim teased. Will you please come inside and have some tea? That I will, but I hope it is more than tea. I'm starving. You have grown quite fat. Look at that paunch. Nadim stroked his flat abdomen, knowing Selina was pulling his legs. He was glad of the simple but substantial fare spread before him: finely cut cucumber sandwiches and rice cakes. He pointed at the delicious cakes and asked, "Where did you get them?" "They are from Dominic's village. It's a predominantly Roman Catholic village, isn't it? With a charming chapel. My three queens and I once picnicked there." Nadim took a noiseless but long sip at his tea, and suddenly there was a deep silence which usurped the room. They were reluctant to break that silence. Nadim fixed his eyes on her. Selina turned the look. 4 years had passed since they had sat before the lotus pond at the TSC, trying to confess a mutual liking, which was fast growing. Nadim's look softened into a caress. He said, "You must be lonely in this house." "I am, but I tried to keep busy." "With what?" "I say you were always interested in Bengali literature. Why not enroll as an MA student?" "What a great idea! Will you be lecturing me?" "I certainly will." Selina smiled with mischief and wrote two words on a bit of paper and said to Nadim, "Please read that." "This? It's a man's name, Hugh Gardiner." Selina gasped with relief, but further cross-examined him. "Why, Hugh?" "The English are a strange race, but stranger is their spelling and pronunciation," Nadim declared with a laugh. Selina asked guiltily, "Can you justify my not liking someone for mispronouncing certain words?" "Bengali and English, both likes and dislikes, are a matter over which reason does not rule." With this philosophical conclusion, Nadim put an end to Selina's conflicts. There was a shadow approaching. It was Dominic's. He asked if he could go shopping for bread and eggs for the next day's breakfast. Selina wasn't sure, but Nadim interposed. "Let him go. He could get me some fags." "You don't smoke." "Anything to get rid of the fellow." Dominic had already left. Nadim took Selina in his arms, kissing her mouth. Selina's aunt, Mrs. Sharmeen Rahman, stayed close by in Banani. She was her mother's younger sister. Mrs. Rahman patronized a young painter who offered to paint Selina's parents' portraits. Firoz Ali had his gallery in Gulshan, about a mile from Selina's house. She had placed her parents' photographs there so that Firoz could work whenever he pleased. Firoz, a freedom fighter, had been hit in his leg by the enemy's bullets. 6 months in the German Democratic Republic had put him on his feet again, but he still retained a limp. Mrs. Rahman and a few overseas friends had helped to sell his paintings. A Belgian woman diplomat, Veronica Celis, of friend of Selina's, was particularly interested in Firoz. A few days after the momentous meeting with Nadim, Selina had arranged to meet Veronica at Firoz around 3 p.m. in the afternoon. As she drove, she kept toying with the idea of joining the Bengali department as an MS student. There were certain gaps in her reading which could be filled up that way. Selina was about to pass Gulshan's second circle when she found a blue Toyota Corolla following her. The man inside was laughing most outrageously, his eyes fixed on her as she slowed down. She stopped. It was Nadim. "I just bought this reconditioning thing." "You did? You seem to be in a terrible hurry about everything." Selina frowned. She was worried. "I took out my Provident Fund money. If I'm to woo a princess who lives in Gulshan, I do need a car." "You hardly waited to woo." Selina didn't know how to complete that sentence. There was a faint smile on her lips. The smile broadened as she saw the owner of the newly acquired car wearing Kolhapuri chappals which had snapped. "The first thing I'm going to do is buy you a pair of Kolhapuris. Follow me, you beggar." They both parked at Gulshan 2 DIT Market, opposite Firoz's. There were several leather shops. Selina selected a pair of pure leather sandals for Nadim. Then she ordered, Now get into those quickly as you are going to meet a beautiful Belgian diplomat. You are not to flirt with her because a wonderful freedom fighter is in love with her. This sounds interesting, but I can't promise anything. Veronica and Firoz were having coffee. Veronica cried, "Oh, you have found me a Bengali teacher at last, have you? This is Nadim, the famous Bengali scholar, Veronica. I don't mind being your teacher." Nadim, all teeth, shook hands with the tall, attractive Nordic female diplomat. Veronica whispered into Selina's ears, "Firoz and I are engaged. I am keeping it a secret because I might lose my job if I marry a foreigner." Selina gasped in joy. "This is great news." Firoz started making coffee for his guests while they looked at Selina's mother's unfinished portrait. Veronica was wearing a blue sari with a white blouse. She was too blonde to look oriental. She envied the dark haired and dark eyed Selina. That was the color she would like for her own eyes and hair. But she was relieved to see Nadim with Selina, whose tenderness towards Firoz had made Veronica uncomfortable. Once Selina had remarked, "I could literally kiss the ground on which a freedom fighter has walked." Veronica has irritated and amused at the same time. She had widened her eyes and said, "Really? Kiss it then." "I will if I want to. I don't have to prove anything to you." That sharp rejoinder had made Veronica mistakenly think that Selina was in love with Firoz. Now the doubt had vanished. She asked, "Selina, are you busy tonight? Why not come and try potluck with me? I could play your favorite Ninth Symphony on the piano." Selina, uncomfortable in clothes which were soaked in perspiration, answered, "I don't know what Nadim's plans are, but I want to go home for a bath. I have been in these rags since morning." Nadim was disappointed. He would have wanted to join them, but his parents had arrived from their village in Comilla and he had to be present at the evening meal. Veronica said, "Nadim, can't you phone your parents and tell them you are out with your girlfriend?" "Impossible," said Nadim. Selina piped in brightly, "Veronica, if you are not busy, make it another night." When they came out, Nadim said quietly, "I would like you to meet my parents. They are wonderful people." Selina, a little nervous, wanted to postpone this. She said, "Yes, by and by." She was glad that Nadim had not fallen victim to the modern hatred of parents, which again was a byproduct of Western influence. It was also the result of modern affluent parents seeking constant fun at the expense of their children's security and happiness. The two cars separated at Gulshan First Circle. Selina, though deeply in love, cherished her freedom, the ability to go home without brushing shoulders with in-laws. She made herself a tomato sandwich, crushed some fresh melons in the blender, and put on Chopin's Le Sylphides on the recorder. Then she began a letter to Rupert. "Although I have not written before, there are times when I miss you, when I feel you could comprehend things without my telling you about them." She tore off the note, fearing the depth of understanding that she attributed to Rupert probably did not exist. It was Nadim who was more sensitive and intelligent, but Selina was suddenly afraid of his family ties. She herself longed to go to Alfadanga, the village where her father was born. She wanted to visit her grandparents' graves. She had a vague memory of a tin-roofed cottage with an easy chair on the veranda. She had liked the old-fashioned Victorian sideboard and dressing table in her parents' bedroom. Her grandmother lived in the adjoining room. She felt a strong bond between her and these factors. Repentant, she rang up Nadim, who seemed depressed for some unknown reason. Perhaps he was hurt at her lack of eagerness to meet his parents. Selina cajoled him. "I'll come and meet your parents tomorrow. There is a favor I have to ask, though." "Favors granted. What is it?" "You must drive me down to Alfadanga, my ancestral village." What a mixture of Latin and Bengali, but how will the locals react to a man and woman gadding about without tying the knot? I don't know the answer to that. Let us experiment. Let us find out. The experiment might prove dangerous. I am not afraid of danger. I live with it. I thrive on it. declared Selina dramatically, knowing full well that she was guilty of overstatement. I have no lectures on Thursday. We can start early. By then, my parents should settle down. Selina decided to pretend that she and Nadim were wife and husband. Should there be any questions, she was abroad so long, her parents had been so busy during the last years of their lives that their village relatives and neighbors knew very little about them. Dominic, usually reticent, asked, "Are you going somewhere?" "Yes, I would have taken you with me, but someone has to stay back, guard the house, feed the dogs, you know." Dominic nodded. On Thursday morning, Nadim arrived early at 5 a.m. The April morning was unusually cool. It felt good to breathe the fresh air. Up to Aricha Ferry Center, the drive was more or less enjoyable. At that early hour, there was no heavy traffic, but when they reached the river terminal, there was an unbearable delay. They waited for the ferry, tired and sleepy. Selina bought some green coconuts to quench their thirst. Nadim was unhappy about leaving his parents. Selina said, "I was wrong to plan this trip when your people are visiting. You are sad." "Yes, a little." There was something in my mother's eyes, a sort of suppressed pain. Nadim narrowed his eyes in an effort to enter into that unspoken sorrow. Selina felt Nadim to be very far away from her, although they were sitting next to each other. But her respect for him grew on seeing his concern for his parents. She pressed his hand, but he did not respond. "This hurt," she said. "Let's go back." He agreed immediately. Nadim dropped Selina at her place and rushed to his parents in his flat at Savage Road. He wondered who Savage and Fuller were, after whom these roads were named. There was genuine joy in his mother's eyes as she greeted him. "You came back." "Yes, Amma." He took a long drink of water and lifted up his mother's hands and rubbed his aching forehead with them. This was an old trick which dated back to his infancy. His mother, still young looking in her red bordered Rajshahi silk, which he had bought her during some festival, wore the smile of a 16-year-old. He wondered with horror whether Selina had it in her to hurt this woman whom he loved so. He was not sure. In the past, his mother always asked what he wanted to eat. Now the tables were turned. Since his parents were in his flat, he kept feeding them on fruits and sweets till his father remonstrated. "You forget that elderly people have weaker stomachs." Nadim decided to spend the entire day with them. He refrained from telephoning Selina, but there were times when his parents engaged in talk, which seemed to exclude him. At these times he felt restless. He picked up the phone and said to Selina enticingly, "How about that trip? We'll go later when you are ready." "Are you alone?" "No, Feroz and Veronica are here. Feroz is helping Veronica to write a book on the liberation movement. Tell her I could collect some material for her." "That's good news." "I love you." These were words which Selina never uttered herself. "I'm not sure that I do." "Doesn't bother me. That's life." Nadim put down the phone. The tendrils and flowers embroidered on his mother's sari border with green silk thread had framed her face, its oily texture highlighting her beautiful features. The grace of a bashful Bengali woman's face, Nadim thought, was unparalleled by any other female beauty. How the poorest Bengali woman, unable to afford the luxury of a blouse or petticoat, wrapped her short plebeian sari around herself and covered all the delicate parts of her body was a wonder to him. Dressed in that seamless garment, she carried heavy pitchers of water, husked the ripe sheaves of paddy, walked miles to collect firewood, and yet her sari never slipped from her bosom or waist. Nadim looked at his mother's tapering palms joined in the finale of the prayer. Nothing in this world seemed purer than those hands. For some time Nadim had not been able to sit down at his writing table. He caressed with loving fingers with which the diary in which he had recorded his experience of the Pakistani genocide of the Bengalis in 1971. He was barely 12 then. His parents had put him in the house of an uncle who taught physics at the university. He was given a bed and a table in a corner of their flat in Savage Road, where he lived now. in a different block. The school, established for the children of university teachers, was just next door. It had no playground and was run by a youngish woman with flighty eyes and a harsh voice. Nadim missed his parents and the relative slow pace of life, which he had left behind in the village. But his gifts were being recognized here in a way which was beyond his wildest dreams in the village. He became a regular artist in the children's programs on radio and television. He also wrote for the children's pages. Everyone recognized him in the streets and shops as the prize boy from the village. His uncle, a cousin of his mother's, Hussein Ahmed, shared with Nadim a similar background. He had also come from the village to stay with an uncle. Hussein Ahmed had stood first in the first class in physics honors. The 3 years he spent in Karnal, where he went on a government scholarship, had given him the extra glamour which brightened an already brilliant career. He made much of the boy and never allowed Nadim to feel unwanted. A good looking man, when not immersed in his books and experiments, he listened to Indian classical music. He was also a close friend of Selina's parents. His wife and Selina's mother were distantly related as well. The entire country was in a ferment over the non-cooperation movement launched by Sheikh Mujibur Rahman. February, as usual, was fiery. March came with a lull of pent-up tension, which could explode any minute. Nadim longed to join the crowds in the streets. When no one was around, he watched his own face in the mirror as he improvised a fiery speech directed against the Pakistani military junta. But his uncle kept a close watch on him. On the evening of 25th March, an old associate from Colonel Frank Wilder had dined in their flat. Hussein's wife, Sarah, took out her lace tablecloth and rarely used cutlery to set the table. She had made Nadim collect some pink wildflowers, which she arranged in a brass bowl. Nadim had never seen anything like this before. 2 olive green candles were lit in the candelabra. Sarah put on a Ravi Shankar on the recorder. Nadim, captivated, lapped up the entire scene with eager eyes. He decided he would like to entertain like this when he grew up. Sarah herself, in a Lady Hamilton sleeveless black blouse and light blue silk sari, looked ravishing. Nadim adored his aunt as she went about in a flurry, baking and cooking and constantly consulting her cookery book. She was trying out some European dishes. She had made a fish souffle with cheese and tomatoes. She had gone to Newmarket herself to pick the freshest bekti. She also made a fabulous Russian salad with eggs and mayonnaise. For pudding, she had baked a soft orange cake to be taken with the fragrant custard. These exotic dishes had opened a new world to Nadim. The university flat, dusted, cleaned, and decorated with fresh leaves and flowers, looked out of the world. Dr. Wilder smelled Sarah's sandalwood scent and the inviting flavor of the baked dishes from the kitchen and gave a broad smile. Hussein, you don't live like a poor Bengali. Nadim was all ears, trying to understand that English spoken in a different twang. Looking at the boy, Frank Wilder joked, "You devil, how did you produce a strapping 12-year-old out of the blue? You got married only last year." "He's my nephew, a brilliant chap. He can give you each detail of the American history if you care to question him," Hussein stated with immense pride. Nadim had eaten in the kitchen, afraid of the instruments which he did not yet know how to handle. He helped his aunt to bring in the steaming dishes and then lay them symmetrically on the dining table, according to her instructions. He watched with fascination and skill and briskness with which the three handled the knives and forks. He made up his mind to be able to do the same, someday in the bright future, hardly anticipating that the very existence of his race would be in jeopardy, that fateful night of the 25th of March 1971. After the meal, they sat in the veranda. Sarah said, "Frank, I am afraid you won't like my coffee. I don't have a percolator." I have made some Chinese garden tea. With jasmine, Nadim ventured to put in these two English words. Excellent, excellent. You Bengalis are marvelous people. No American should have served a Bengali dinner like this. Sarah has never been out of this country. Wilder was amazed by Hussein's words. The entire dinner had a French flavor which he loved. Sipping the green tea, he winked at Hussein. Some style, old guy. Nadim threw up the green tea, which he had taken stealthily in a glass. But the grown ups seemed to relish it. Wilder asked for another cup, remarking, "The Chinese have a habit of filling your cup again and again." Sorry, that's what I should have done, Sarah said in her perfect Covent English. Hussein lit a cigarette, and suddenly the entire horizon reverberated with violent sounds, the like of which they had never heard before. Frank Wilder would have left in a minute or two. Red flames and smoke, a surf, and tranquil sky. They quickly closed the doors and windows and moved inside. These sound like machine guns and mortars, Wilder stated. Hussein picked up the phone. It was dead. "I think I hear tanks," he said. The next door neighbor, Mr. Hamid Hussain, who worked in the English department, came in through a side door, which had been left inadvertently open. "Please shut all your doors," he said. "This is an army crackdown. Anything can happen." He rushed out and Sarah closed the door behind him with trembling hands. Nadim knew she was with child. He said to his aunt, "Why don't you lie down? I'll clear the table." She embraced him impulsively and said, "No, my darling, just be quiet, don't move." The day's hard work and the shock of this unexpected violence must have made her nerves snap. She fainted. Her husband picked her up and put her in bed. The two men and one boy sat up all night. Towards daybreak they heard footsteps. Theirs was a third-floor flat. On the ground floor lived Dr. Guhathakurta, a senior professor of the English department. The noise of shooting seemed to come from that direction. Someone knocked on their door. It was Hassan. "They have shot Dr. Guhathakurta. He is lying in a pool of blood." "What? Has your federal government gone mad?" Wilder screamed in anger. Hussein was about to rush downstairs. Nadim gave out a wild cry. "Mama, please don't go. They are going to kill us." Hassan advised, "You mustn't move. They are still shooting. We must wait quietly." The whole day passed in an unbearable anxiety with grief. Curfew had been announced through the radio. Wilder had borrowed a car from one of his diplomat friends. It was parked outside, but he could not leave. The sound of shooting had merely subsided only for a while. It began again in full vigor, almost destroying people's eardrums. The red glow in the sky and the heavy roar of mortars continued. Towards sunrise, the terrible din seemed to subside. Hussein was busy tending Sarah. Nadim took her a cup of warm milk. Together they washed her head. They found Wilder in the kitchen trying to make tea. Hussein took over, asking his guests to leave it to him. Wilder went for a wash. A heart-rending moaning sound rose from downstairs. Nadim covered his ears and said, "It must be Dr. Guhathakurta's wife." Hussein's face was red with anger, and he made tea. He said, "You see, Frank, we have allowed a pack of wolves to rule us. We Bengalis are too busy with poetry and music. What we need now is military training." During a recent convocation of the university, when a leading scientist, Dr. Kudrat Kuda, had announced the need of martial lessons for the Bengali youth, the audience was a bit taken aback. Now everyone understood the significance of that council. The curfew was lifted the following morning at about 11. Wilder said to Hussein before driving off, "I'll come back with provisions. I have seen everything. I'll report all this to the Herald Tribune." Hussein pleaded with him, "Frank, please don't come back here. We may not be here when you come. Don't take me amiss. I'll contact you if I can. These are very bad times. Goodbye, my friend." Nadim had liked the blue-eyed physicist. They shook hands. As Wilder's car left, their eyes fell on the blood streaming from Dr. Guhathakurta's flat into the porch. Hassan was locking the front door. He whispered, "He has been taken to medical college. We have hidden his wife and daughter as best as we could. Now we must buy some provisions before the curfew is imposed again. Hassan's clothes were smeared with Guatakuta's blood. Suddenly Hussein lost his nerve. He sat down on the steps and started howling and sobbing uncontrollably. Nadim had never seen his uncle break down like this. Hussein wailed. Guatakurta was such a wonderful man. He was Sarah's teacher. Sarah will never recover from this. Please don't tell her anything. She might have a miscarriage. As it is, her condition is bad. Tears streamed down his face. He had torn some of his hair. Hassan and Nadim held him from both sides and took him upstairs. The dishes lay on the table. The flowers had withered. The candles had lost their shape. The festive atmosphere of the previous evening had changed into a general appearance of hopelessness and disorder. When Hassan left, Nadim, sitting between Hussein and Sarah, felt he had a lot of responsibility towards this couple, who had sheltered him with such loving care. He stroked his uncle's back, bent with grief and bewilderment, and said firmly, "Mama, we cannot stay here. We must not stay here. Let us go to Muradpur to come, my parents." Sarah, who had recovered a little, said to her husband, "He is right, we must go." "How can we? The army is everywhere." "We'll dress like poor villagers," said Nadim. Briskly they poured mustard oil over their heads to make their hair look greasy. They put on lungis. Sarah took out her cheapest sari and wound it around her in village style. They made bundles of onions, potatoes, and rice. It was now the evening of the 27th. Quickly locking the front door, they stole out of Savage Road. Near Jagannath Hall, the hostel for Hindu students, there was a heavy military patrol. When confronted by the army, Hussein and his wards opened their bundles and offered the potatoes and rice. They wailed and kept pleading, "Sir, please take all we have and let us return to our village." Mistaking them to be absconding house servants who were too simple to be dangerous and soldiers, led them off, saying impatiently, Go get out of our sight, Bengali buggers." Hussein got into a baby taxi with his family. Their village, not far from Narayanganj, was reached before midnight. Muradpur village did not look the tranquil place it had been. They saw half-burnt homesteads and cornfields. Smoke had enveloped the entire horizon. Nadim's parents were in bed. Hearing their son's voice, they came out with a hurricane lamp. The woman broke into sobs. The men stood in stony speechlessness. No words could express their predicament. Nadim's mother awakened Golapi, the housemaid, and got about preparing a simple meal for the weary travelers. She had water drawn from the pond. They snatched a couple of hours' sleep towards the dawn. After a fortnight, Hussein managed to sneak out to India with his wife. From there, he flew to the United States, where he settled down for good. It was Nadim who was now installed in a Savage Road university flat. Hussein came on vacation last year and stayed with Nadim. Frank Wilder, a renowned name in physics, shared the Nobel Prize with another countryman. Nadim had seen the carnage caused by the Pakistan army in Dhaka and in his own village. He was then only 12, yet he had been able to force the Husseins to leave their Savage Road flat from where just when victory was at the door. In December, Hamid Hussein and several other teachers were killed. Hussein Ahmed had escaped the butchers by going to Nadim's village and then to Kolkata. Selina woke up to the sound of a cuckoo perched on the gulmohar tree on the south side of her garden. She wrapped her grey satin dressing gown around her and came to the veranda. Dominic handed her a cup of freshly made tea. She had not seen Nadim for the last 3 days. There were letters from abroad. Both Rupert and Baronet had written. They had read reports of the last devastating floods in Bangladesh and were anxious about Selina. Rupert was now married to the Honourable Celia, the daughter of an ex-member of Parliament. The Baronet was contemplating a tour of the subcontinent and might come to Dhaka around early May. "Ah," Selina thought, "it will be hot and humid and it will coincide with Tagore's birth celebration when it will be very busy." Nadim phoned to say that his mother was going to make a special Bengali lunch, so would she join them? Selina said yes, nervously. She had a bath. She put on a green bordered Tangail sari and drove to Nadim's. The staircase was foul. It smelled of fish, but Nadim's flat was immaculately clean. Sparsely furnished, there was not a single comfortable chair around. She knew Nadim was Spartan, but her waist was sore owing to hours of gardening. She touched Nadim's parents' feet, eager to display her familiarity with traditions. She could not have met a more dignified couple. They were perfectly natural. Nadim's father, Riaz Ahmed, said, I believe you are joining the Bengali department. That seems a good decision. Just because your son teaches there, Asma teased her husband. They not the rustic, prejudiced people that Selina had feared them to be. Nadim watched the three with close concentration, felt all was well. He smiled. I hope you like the Amma's menu. My own cooking is merely functional. There are many Bengali delicacies that I have never tasted. Nadim had deliberately spread an expensive sheetal mat on the floor. Only a sheetal mat could provide the welcome coolness soothing to human skin. These mats, mostly made in Sylhet, had an extra polish and were beautifully cool all day and night. Selina thought in the hot and humid weather this should be spread on beds also instead of sheets. In fact, in their village home, the wooden bedsteads were all covered with sheetal mats. Nadim's originality and ethnic bias were expressed in the unique way the food was served. Freshly washed banana leaves instead of china plates were used to serve the food on. A bowl of appetizers was passed around. It contained thick slices of green mangoes brewed in mustard sauce and molasses. Corianders and bay leaves with mint did the flavoring. It was called goromba. Immersed in the pleasure of tasting that delectable dish, Selina had noticed the eyes of Riaz Ahmed watching her with affectionate amusement. Before she could color in embarrassment, he said pleasantly, When young people enjoy pickles, we know they are still kids. Selina's nose, forehead, and chin were beaded with drops of perspiration. Throwing sophistication to the winds, she licked her fingers greedily. Nadim burst out laughing. I have never seen you like this. You will soon lick your elbows. Young children in the village, reluctant to lose the delicious juice of mangoes, do that all the time. Asma Begum's next dish was kashundi and papda fish cooked in onions. Kashundi was a special sauce prepared with green mango juice and mustard. Selina had heard of it. This was the first time she saw and tasted it. The highlight of the lunch was lobster cooked in fried spices. The white rice on the banana leaves turned red as the juicy lobsters mingled with it. Such food always led to overeating. Selina said with alarm, If I stay here another minute, I'll turn into an incurable glutton. Nadim protested, You are not going now. I have just started my meal. Asma brought in the dessert. Wild red rice cooked in milk and molasses with bits of cloves and cardamom thrown in. Asma asked in a soft voice, How's the payesh? Out of the world, extraordinary. Really, I forgot to put the cinnamon. After tea, Selina insisted on leaving. She agreed to go to the Bengali department to get admissions form. The next morning, as she reached the top of the staircase, Nadim touched her on the shoulder. I hope my parents didn't bore you. They are lovely people. I already love them. I thought good cooking was the way to a man's heart, not a woman's. We'll dispute that some other time. I must go. By the way, can you bring your parents over to dinner tomorrow night? I have to ask them. Do that. As Selina drove, the tall shirish trees seemed to caress her with their sweet breeze. This area where the university was situated was so dear to her. Now it was often clouded by violence and unrest. There was regular hijacking on these roads. Youngsters given to drugs had to obtain large sums of money for heroin by extortion. For the first time, Selina did not regret not having a brother. When she reached home, she found a jubilant letter from Rupert. He had joined British Council and was coming to Dhaka as its chief representative. She rang up Maruf to give him the news. Maruf was the only person in Dhaka who knew Rupert. He didn't sound particularly pleased to hear that news. Selina felt she had neglected him and said impulsively, "Can you come over to dinner tomorrow? I'm calling some people." He agreed. She hung up. She had wanted to say as discreetly as possible, "Please come in Bengali clothes. I like your expensive suits, but it is so hot." But she knew heat seldom prevented Bangladeshi men from wearing heavy, uncomfortable Western clothes. The next morning's visit to the Bengali department was a sort of reunion. As vice president of the biggest women's hall of the university, Selina was well known in all the departments. Nadim, however, was not around. He had gone to a lengthy Senate meeting. Selina filled in the form of the M.Phil program, Tagore's political stance in the 4 chapters. In the place of the thesis supervisor, she put down Nadim's name. As she drove back, the shop's sign irritated Selina, another glaring instance of her countrymen's lack of dignity and that idiotic addiction to everything foreign. 24 years of independence, 9 months, harrowing guerrilla war, nothing would cure her people of slavery to outsiders. The more unsophisticated and half educated people were, the more they loved foreign brands, names, and goods. In the villages, boys were given names like Ripon, Liton, Milton, etc. She looked at the names of the shops and turned her face away in shame and disgust. Canton Stationery, Oxford Shoes. Not a single road was named after the martyred intellectuals till recently. All the avenues in Bonani and Mohammadpur bore the names of Mughal emperors and Turkish rulers. In Canton and Oxford, would any Chinese or English trader care to put up shop sign like Dhaka Stationery, Chittagong Shoes? Patriotism here was skin deep, in spite of the momentous liberation war. Most people she knew had failed to transmit the history or tradition to their children. The only country Bangladeshis hated was India, where they took shelter in millions when hounded by the Pakistan junta. The huge number of Indian soldiers who died in the war was never mentioned. There was even an unholy hurry and enthusiasm to rehabilitate the collaborators and to make peace with Pakistan. As if thousands of children had not been butchered, countless women raped. Selina's aunt's sons and daughters behaved as if they had no connection with the country they lived in. Once she had given Sheila a cotton, handloom sari and locally made soap as birthday gifts. A few days later, Selina found her aunt's domestic help wearing the sari. Sheila's dog, Sandra, was being washed with the soap. Sheila herself was about to go to a beauty parlor and was getting into a pair of figure-hugging slacks, which gave prominence to the triangular outline between her thighs. She, who had never been abroad, knew the name of each and every expensive French perfume. A girl of 19 who had never earned a penny in her life used only the costliest foreign cosmetics. She opened her bottle of poison and smiled at Selina. Her clothes, shoes, purse were all expensive. Selina, who could legitimately be called rich, never wasted the money her parents had earned with hard work. She would glare at these overdressed girls who spent huge sums on makeup and clothes. They insisted on speaking English, which was far from correct. Their Bengali was atrocious. Some of them had also taken to whiskey and cigarettes, but they had no notion of Western etiquette. In an embassy party, Selina sat next to a woman with afro hairdo, which did not suit her. It must have also cost a fortune to twist and crinkle normal Bengali hair to make it look so dry and lifeless. Selina personally liked the wet look but would not bother to cultivate anything, which would involve waste of time and money. She looked at another woman whose sari held under her navel left her midriff totally bare. The flesh and the fat stood out like open invitations to men. The woman was talking about some diamonds she had bought at Antwerp. Selina eyed the heavy and ugly diamond ring, which some cunning Belgian jeweler must have sold to her at a fancy price. Selina was proud of her own ancestral ruby ring, shaped by Indian artisans into a flower. She loathed most European jewelry designs that were ungainly. They could not compare with the delicacy of craftsmanship that was to be found in the subcontinent or the Middle East. She moved restlessly to an elderly man who sat alone. Why, when their country was still in the making, its women could talk openly of European diamonds, she did not understand. The men here drank more whiskey and beer than was swallowed by the men of more affluent nations. These men and women could not move a step without help of their domestic help, yet their houses were in disorder. 5 or 6 male attendants constantly served their masters day and night. When their employers were absent, they lolled around, oogling at women or gossiping. Their main task was to respond to their masters' frequent orders. Bring this, bring that. A Bengali gentleman would seldom wash his clothes or make his own meal. If he did, the loss of face would be unbearable. Selina defied these stupid conventions and worked as much as she could. She wondered, since all the children were brought up by maids, what did ladies who did not earn this living do all day? They got into their chauffeur driven car, went on morning visits, disturbing and upsetting all others' households since mornings are busy for everyone. Then they did some useless shopping only to come back tired to eat a 10-course heavy meal. In the evenings, they stayed at parties with their husbands till 1 a.m. in the night. No wonder men were so slow and inefficient in their offices. They drank so much, socialized such a lot that their brains did not work, much function properly. There was delay at each point of official and trade negotiations. If these men and women were sane and sensible, disciplined and wise, this indeed would be an enchanting place. Selina decided to find out Nadim's habits. She knew he did not drink or smoke and was a serious scholar, but one never knew. He might be the inveterate partygoer whiling away the night in useless talk. Selina did not want to tie her life with a man whose frivolity went so far as that. Most well-to-do Bangladeshi young men lived like that. About 2 or 3 months ago, much before Nadim had confessed his love, Selina ran into him at an exhibition of Firoz's paintings at Veronica's. There were snacks and drinks for a selected few in Veronica's dining room. Here Selina saw a group of young tycoons. She had seen them at the Dhaka Club, heard of their fabulous standard of living. This nouveau rich class could afford the luxuries because of the huge bank loans they had taken. They sometimes openly declared that they had no intention of paying back these loans. With borrowed money, which virtually belonged to poor taxpayers, they lived in the comfort of air-conditioned rooms, gardens with fountains, and plush grand offices. A few years of good living had given them a certain polish which worked in business circles. Their previous lower middle class background was totally wiped out by imported limousines and glamorous female private secretaries at their beck and call. But they were afraid of talking to men like Nadim. 2 of them were his class fellows. They were in their immaculate European suits. Nadim was in his usual khadi, cream-colored kurta. The young entrepreneurs bought several paintings. Buying art was now a status symbol in Bangladesh. They paid quite a high price for them willingly. Selina was glad for Firoz, but her lips curled with an ironical smile when she thought how unwilling they would be to buy a Bengali novel even for only 100 takas. She watched their clumsy flattery towards Veronica, heard their doubtful English. She would not have minded that bad English if these men had mastered at least their mother tongue with reasonable correctness. As it happened, their Bengali was pathetic. Selina also noticed the readiness with which they emptied the bottles of hard drinks. What was going to happen to a land which is run by a lackadaisical bureaucracy, easily bought off by these mushroom tycoons? Selina had wondered with dismay. They hardly even looked at her, leave alone utter a single friendly word. To them, she was of no consequence. So why waste their breath on a girl in a plain cotton sari and sandals? Because of the heat, Selina had piled her hair on the top of her head. This gave her face a severe look. Veronica was in her glitzy black and silver strapless evening dress, which revealed a substantial quantity of peach and cream flesh adorned by 3 strings of blue pearls. The businessmen had mastered the art of European clothes, but their manners were Bangladeshi, which meant total indifference to people who did not hold any important rank or position. They avoided showing any courtesy to their own women. Selina had run into quite a number of these men in Europe. They lost their heads as soon as they spotted a lively white woman. They were good, generous men, most of whom were kind and hospitable to the white girls they took out. Selina looked again at the 2 tycoons talking to the white women. She had heard that they went abroad very often. They were immensely popular in clubs and offices because of the heavy tips they gave to the bartenders and mess bearers and the free way that they spent on their friends. Their swimming pools, fountains, and fabulous drawing rooms were financed by the taxes of sad people who could never dream of such luxuries. That evening, Selina had longed to talk to Nadim, but it would have meant having to be polite to the businessman talking to him. Firoz had sold a huge number of paintings at very good prices. He was glowing with the joy of success. He brought Selina a glass of chilled grape juice from Veronica's special stock. He asked, "Have you seen Nadim standing over there?" "Yes, I have. Those 2 men have buttonholed him good and proper." Selina had come home with a feeling of sadness. She had expected Nadim to come over and say hello to her, which he hadn't. Actually, she was so quiet and withdrawn that Nadim had not even seen her. Selina came home and sat in her unlit veranda reminiscing. She had been so close to Nadim once. How intimately she had sat next to him in front of the lotus fountain at the TSC. Between rehearsals of You Can Never Tell. Now he was as good as a stranger. She was shocked at herself to find her face wet with tears. Now, as Selina busied herself preparing for the dinner, she felt totally at peace. She knew that she had found her man. The comfort that she found in his arms was something akin to well-being she had only known in the company of her parents. Neither she nor Dominic was a great cook. She had seen her mother prepare her father's favorite dish, Hillshire mustard. She cooked this with Dominic's help. There were also pea pulao and mutton risala. Dominic had roasted some chicken. Selina decided to serve ice cream with fresh mangoes, her clothes stained with spices, her hair emitting that telltale kitchen smell. She was up to her ears when Nadim barged in, unannounced. "I have brought you my criticism on the 4 chapters and some gardenias." "My God, is that you?" "Don't come near me, I am really dirty. Where did you find the flowers? I have some in my garden." "I haven't stolen flowers from your garden to give them to you. I have grown them myself on the terrace." "I don't believe it. You are lying. Come and see." "Are you out of your mind? I have heaps of work to do. Don't come any nearer. I'm smelling like a fishwife." "I have never kissed a fishwife. Let me try," Nadim said. Dominic came in with a tray full of baked hilsha and saved Selina from Nadim's amorous advances. Nadim went away disappointed. He reappeared with his parents in the evening. Selina said with a smile, "I haven't spread the mat, nor are there any banana leaves." "Everyone cannot be expected to entertain in style," Nadim bragged shamelessly. His mother admonished him, "Stop pulling her leg, will you?" "You see, he must always have the upper hand," said Nadim's father, impressed with Selina's house. Asma Begum was grave and dignified. She looked intently at Selina's parents' photograph. She wiped away a few tears which stood in her eyes. Then she suddenly embraced Selina and declared, "You have a mother here. Do you love my son?" Selina nodded in assent. She was relieved that all this was established so simply and naturally. "What have you brought for your bride, Nadim? For you are going to marry soon," said Nadim's mother. "Am I? Whom?" Nadim simulated total innocence. They all laughed at his affection of ignorance. "Your bride is right beside me," said Asma Begum, kissing Selina on the head. Riaz came forward and joined together Selina and Nadim's hands. Selina, bursting with happiness, remembered that she was expecting other guests. Maruf, her aunt Charmine, with her fashionable daughter Sheila, Firoz, and Veronica were all due. Selina hurriedly arranged a few red lilies from the garden in a bowl and put it on the center table for the drawing room. Nadim's parents, with the help of Dominique, were slowly going around the house. Nadim seized this opportunity and ran to Selina, smothering her with caresses. "Do be sensible, Nadim. I have to be decent for my guests," Selina protested and admonished. Nadim looked up with sadness in his eyes. To curb his impulsiveness, Selina declared, "I have bad news for you, Nadim. An English admirer of mine is coming here as chief of the British Council." "Do you like him?" "In a sort of way. He is very good looking and polished." Selina did not choose to reveal the whole truth about her feelings for Rupert. Before she could finish, Maruf, dressed in a grey suit, arrived with Sheila and Aunt Charmine. Sheila looked devastating in a purple and green dhoti suit. She wore a string of amethyst in her hair and matching ring and bangles. Even her high-heeled sandal shoes were purple. Maruf, all eyes, followed her about without any reserve. Mrs. Sharmin Rahman, who had met Maruf only briefly when he was about to go to England, no longer felt any gratitude to him for carrying her small parcel for Selina. She was annoyed by Maruf's total indifference to her and excessive attention to her daughter. Maruf had even neglected to greet Aunt Charmine. His open pursuit of Sheila from the very moment he set eyes on her was so unceremonious and vulgar that Selina had to intervene in order to appease her aunt. "Maruf, you have met my aunt, Miss Rahman?" He still followed Sheila about with his eyes popping out of their sockets, hardly greeting the mother, who glared in amazement. Unaccustomed to such rudeness, Selina's voice now had a distinct tinge of anger as she said, "Maruf, this is my aunt. Will you please?" Nadim, instead of besotted Maruf, raised his right hand to his forehead, saying, "Salam," to the offended lady. He seated her and said in a soft, cajoling voice, "Do I have your permission to call you Aunt Charmine? I am Selina's class fellow, Nadim." Enraged by Maruf's indifference, Charmine found Nadim totally soothing, a little on the fat side, but still attractive at 50. She opened her Spanish fan, casting a hostile look at Maruf, who was practically fawning on Sheila, his eyes moist with canine worship. "Were you a freedom fighter?" Charmine asked Nadim. "Unfortunately not. I was then only 12 years old. I spent the entire time in our village with my parents. You, of course, know my Aunt Sarah, Hussein's uncle's wife, who I believe is related to you. You will meet an artist who was a freedom fighter. Firoz, I know him only too well. There he comes with Veronica." Nadim's parents had returned after a leisurely inspection of Selina's house. They were introduced to the rest of the company. Sheila had secured very poor marks in her 5 O-level subjects. Her English was weak. She might have fared better in the local secondary school examination, in which Bengali was the medium. A-level would be totally beyond her. TOEFL and SAT would be equally difficult. Although she did not visualize an academic career for herself, she didn't want a career, as things she wanted to wear and use were extremely expensive. She had contemplated being a beautician or an interior decorator. She felt an instant liking to Maruf, whose limited English made him use phrases that he picked up from advertisements and slogans. Later in the evening, he whispered into Sheila's ears, "We are made for each other." This sentence, picked up from an Indian advertisement of Lipton tea, had appealed to Maruf greatly. Now he was making use of it to woo a girl who was, to all purposes, very close to his fantasies. He had positively decided that Sheila was not his cup of tea. There was an inscrutable part of her which he could not penetrate. Whatever heart burning or sadness Maruf had experienced on account of Selina's unresponsiveness disappeared once he set his eyes on the glamorous Sheila. Here was the right girl for him, younger, smarter, altogether more adorable. As it was a buffet, using instruments was optional. Nadim, Selina, Riaz, Asma, and Sharmin used their fingers. Selina winked at Nadim and whispered, I wonder what Aunt's reaction will be when Maruf wants Sheila's hand in marriage. Her reaction will be immaterial. Sheila, the hedonist, will allow nothing to come between her and her pleasures, declared Nadim. He spoke so loudly and dramatically that everyone heard him. Maruf and Sheila were the only ones who did not understand the purport of Nadim's speech because of their poor English. Asma Begum, who could read and write English, knew from her son's biting tones that he was saying something derogatory about Sheila. She frowned at Nadim, but he ignored his mother. Maruf and Sheila colored, visibly confused by the odd reaction of Nadim's words. Veronica was finding it very difficult to suppress the chuckle that was about to burst from her throat. Riaz coughed and Veronica finally split her sides with uncontrollable laughter. Feroz, because of the nagging pain in his left leg where the Pakistani bullets had hit him, was his usual grave, sad self. He seldom smiled. It was only when he painted that there was a glow on his face. It was Selina who committed the ugliest fox pass. Unable to control laughter, the food spurted from her mouth and soiled Nadim's kurta. He brushed off the bits of food nonchalantly. Selina, totally ashamed, left the dining room never to appear before the guests. Charmin, who enjoyed the flavor of satire from her long habit of reading Gulliver's Travels and Jane Austen, was hardly able to check her satisfaction at Nadim's words. She poured food on his plate till he screamed, No more, auntie, I'll die. Riaz shook his head in mild disapproval. In his heart, he adored his son, but he felt sorry for Maruf and Sheila and went over to them and carried on a polite conversation with them. Nadim thought, poor Selina. There was so much food on his plate that it would take almost 15 minutes to do justice to it. By that time, Selina, in her shame and embarrassment, would change into her nightie and go to bed. Maruf ate slowly and quietly, taking comfort in the proximity of the gorgeous Sheila. Her mauve sleeves brushed his well-shaven cheek as she ate demurely with her fork and knife. Asma moved towards Charmin and said, To think the poor child lives here all by herself. There was real concern in her voice. Charmin, hurt by Maruf's brashness and Sheila's insensitiveness, said with emotion, My house is always open for Selina. She is like my own daughter, but she cannot tear herself away from this house which is full of her parents' associations. Selina, mad at herself for messing up Nadim's kurta, was actually burying her tearful face in the last blood-stained sari worn by her mother. In the seclusion of her own bedroom, she was sobbing violently. There was a knock on the door. She knew who it was. She opened the door and Nadim drew her to his shoulders. How can you cry over such a comic happening? Look at my kurta, it's okay. Give me one of your shirts to change into. He pressed her close to his chest and covered her with kisses. Now Selina laughed, taking out one of her largest baggy shirts which she wore with trousers. She said, I am laughing because the whole thing is really funny, but don't expect me to appear in the drawing room. I am too embarrassed leaving your dirty kurta in my bathroom. I'll wash it tomorrow. As Selina showed no sign of coming back, Dominic served the sweet and coffee and the party broke up. Nadim pleaded with everyone to forgive and excuse Selina. thus apologizing to Selina's guests on her behalf. He already felt married to her. Now that he was sharing her disgrace with her, he felt closer to his betrothed. He saw the guests off to the gate and then drove off with his parents, leaving a note for Selina. With Dominic, it said, "Darling, I would have spent the night with you, but I have to think of your reputation." Nadim smiled as he visualized Selina's laughter, which the note was bound to evoke. He wanted to see her laugh more. He prayed so that pleasant dreams and deep sleep could take away the dreadful memories of Selina's parents' accident. Nadim had shuddered with terror when he saw the blood-stained sari. He hugged his mother and said in a choked voice, "Don't ever die, Amma. I love you so, don't leave me ever." "You were naughty today," his mother scolded. "I know, I promise I'll be good." "Be your own naughty self. That's what I like," Asma declared. "You are so good as engaged, Nadim," his father said. Nadim threw up his hands with an impatient gesture and remonstrated. "Don't push things, Abba. Give her time. There should be no hurry from our side." "I agree," said his mother. "Frankly, I feel she should complete this MPhil before I marry her because I am her supervisor. I know this work means a lot to her." "I was only thinking of you. I'm not the one who is marrying. It's your life." His father moved away angrily. "Now you have hurt your father," Asma Begum complained with a long face. Nadim screamed to his heart's content. "It seems I can't please anybody. Okay, I'm no good. I am nincompoop." He always had these tantrums whenever there was a disagreement between him and his parents. Asma ignored him and joined her husband, who was puffing at a pipe. "He could not have his hookah here," Ria said gravely. "Wonderful girl. But what a sad thing to happen. It broke my heart to look at her parents' pictures. That girl must have gone through hell. My Nadim will wipe away all those cobwebs. She could not have found a better man," said Asma with open pride. Nadim, on the way to the bathroom, overheard his mother, and instead of walking, leapt towards the sink and in that process hurt his toes. He scolded himself. "Serves you right, you idiot. The proper blow for the scoundrel dog." He quoted a popular Bengali proverb. It was the middle of April, which coincided with the first of Boishak, the Bengali New Year. Selina, clad in a red-bordered cream Rajshahi silk sari, arrived at Nadim's flat early. Nadim had managed to get a boy, who worked in the Sir Salimullah Hall garden, to make him 4 garlands of red oleanders. The boy, called Salam, had, in exchange, enjoyed the gift of a saffron kurta and homemade sweets. The boy stood smiling in the veranda with the fragrant garlands in his hands. At Nadim's bidding, he garlanded them all. Riaz looked at the boy and asked, "Where's yours, boy?" "We only make them, we never wear them," the boy replied. Riaz promptly took off his own and garlanded Salam. They clapped their hands and sat down to a breakfast of bhapa, rice cakes with coconut bits inside them. As they did not care for the sweet variety made with molasses, Asma had prepared the salty type, which was devoured greedily. Selina asked sheepishly, "Have you got any extras? Can I take one for Dominic?" "There's plenty, take a dozen. You can soften them in the steam and have them later." Asma went to the kitchen and packed a dozen bhapas in one of Nadim's tiffin boxes. She said to Selina, "If you ever want to give my son any present, give him tiffin boxes. He loses one every day." "I'm sorry, Ma," Nadim spoke with difficulty. His mouth was full of rice cake. He said with mischief in his eyes, "Shall I do what you did at your dinner, Selina?" Selina, truly frightened, screamed, running and hiding behind Asma. She cried, "Amma, please stop him. This is a new sari presented by Aunt Sharmeen. She'll be mad if I spoil it." Asma, overwhelmed with emotion at being called Amma, drew Selina to her breast, threatening her son, "How dare he when you are in my arms?" I was only trying to help. I thought the incident was on her conscience. I only do good, but no one appreciates that, said Nadim dramatically. He looked extremely attractive in his pure silk cream kurta, black trousers, and the wreath of red oleanders around his neck. The oleanders were a mixture of gold and pink, and their scent was fruity and intoxicating. Nadim saw himself in the mirror and blurted out, Ma, I feel like marrying this very instant. Can I please? Don't listen to that shameless brat, Asma said, stroking Selina's hair. Asma's opal nose top radiated all the colors of the rainbow. A certain fragrance from her reminded Selina of her own dead mother. Ever busy with her medical duties, she made time for her child. She would sit down and play with little Selina as often as she could. When Selina had grown into a girl, her mother would relate incidents of her student days at medical college. It is here that her parents had met as class fellows. The thought that she would never see or touch them again brought a lump to her throat and tears to her eyes. She controlled herself, but Asma had noticed the change of mood. She said to Nadim, Why don't you three go to hear the songs at Ramna Park while we rest at home? Isn't it too late? Selina asked. Selina, my parents wanted to know when we were planning the wedding. I said not before your MPhil is completed. Nadim said in a grave voice. You said? Who gave you the authority? I see. You'd rather get married first and not do the MPhil. It's settled then, but I'm disappointed. Stop heckling her, protested his father. I'm not heckling her. I'm serious. You see, Selina, I can't be your supervisor if we are married. What's your decision in that event? I'd rather wait and marry later. I want to do this work first. There you are, see? Nadim looked triumphantly at his parents. They smiled weakly. Selina got busy making preparations for Tagore's birthday celebration. She always spent a lot of time and energy on this event. In England, she had made Rupert and Sir Hugh read translations from Tagore. The audience, mostly English, had responded warmly, and it appeared the two would be here by early May, which was marvelous. If Rupert arrived earlier than the gardeners, he could put up with them. Otherwise, Selina would have to make one of those upstairs bedroom ready for them. But she was lucky and was spared the botheration. Rupert did come towards the end of April and invited Selina to supper a day after he arrived. He occupied one of those one-storied cozy houses within the British Council compound. His predecessor had left a good cook and bearer and a clean, well-furnished house. Sarah was to join him after her confinement. Selina asked him over for tea, so they could have a long chat before dinner. What a lovely house and what a beautiful country. Wait till you see the slums. Rupert, glowing with happiness, kissed Selina on the cheek. He loved dressing informally in a t-shirt and light trousers. In England, Selina and he had plenty of opportunities of being intimate, but some undefined constraint had held her back. Rupert was so different from Arthur, who had prejudiced her against other Englishmen whom she had feared to be what she termed limited. After meeting Maruf, who was 10 times worse than Arthur, she had given up all hope of finding a man she could really love. Rupert, after all she had known him closely, proved to be resilient and therefore attractive to her. But she had never told him categorically that she liked him. Do you know everyone thinks Bangladesh is a punishment posting? But it is not, declared Rupert. I'm so glad you think so. Selina pondered for a minute over the paradox of her not liking England, which was overrated by locals, and Rupert's thrilled discovery of the grace of a poor country which was always disparaged by people who did not even know it. She felt she could not depend on human judgment, which was often faulty. Dominic had, meanwhile, brought out the best silver on the black and gold tea trolley. I say you do live elegantly. I don't normally. All this is in your honor. Selina, there is something I have to tell you. Rupert's eyes looked moist. He continued, This may not be the best time to say it. It happened in Stratford-upon-Avon. I fell in love with you. Me too, Selina confessed. Why didn't we tell each other? We were such fools. Rupert shook his head sadly. It is good that we didn't. It wouldn't have worked, Selina stated softly. Be a tender spot in my heart for you, Rupert declared. Same here, Selina responded quietly with tears in her eyes. It was such anguish. Rupert looked away from her to hide the painful memory of that past pain. Through the wide French windows of the drawing room, the tall rows of white lilies were visible. Rupert's eyes lingered lovingly on them. He looked around in thrilled surprise and said, It hardly looks the primitive place that people imagine it to be. Your country surely has had the wrong kind of publicity. Selina knew that Nadim would be busy with a television program. When dusk had deepened, Rupert said, It's so comfy here that I almost forgot that I have to take you to supper at my place. The British Council was very close to Nadim's university flat. As he was coming out in his car to go to the television station, he saw Rupert's car speeding past him. Selina was sitting beside Rupert in the front seat. He waved at them and stopped the car. Rupert pulled up by the roadside and shook hands with Nadim. Riaz, strolling in a leisurely manner in the neighborhood, wondered what was going on. He leaned on his walking stick, confused by what he saw. Selina did not know what to do. Riaz was too far from them for her to introduce to Rupert. She shot a salam at him, which the old man did not return. Nadim smiled and explained to Rupert, That's my old man. Meet him some other time. Have a good time, you two. Selina was not sure whether Nadim was hurt or not. He looked his usual cheerful self. Rupert asked, Is that the man you are marrying? I think so. He's a wonderful chap, very attractive. I'm glad for you, Selina. You couldn't have found a better person. In Rupert's house, Selina saw Sarah's photograph on a stupid and insensitive about the face. She dreaded meeting her. Selina felt that, like Lady Julia Gardiner, Sarah too would be prejudiced against her and her people. She would sense Rupert's unhappiness. The feeling that had grown in her for him was still raw. Selina felt helpless under his power. But she could not give up Nadim, not for the world. She rang him when the supper was over. I'm glad you are back from your TV program. Since Rupert brought me, I have no car. Can you take me home? Let me see. All right, I think I can. When should I come? In half an hour. Ask him to join us for coffee. Give me the receiver, would you? I'll ask him myself. Very soon the three sat in Rupert's wire-netted veranda, smothered by pale yellow bougainvillea, sipping coffee. Nadim invited Rupert for lunch the following Saturday and asked Selina, What about you? Will you come? No, please, leave me out. I have things to do. Above all, I have to start reading for the MPhil synopsis I have to prepare for you. That's pure humbug. If I can take you home openly through the university area, there's no point in you saying that. We'll see, said Selina. And then turning to Rupert, she asked, What shall I do about the gardeners? They'll be here any day now. I could put them up, but the point is, will they be at home in Bengali surroundings? Your house could be Italian, Greek, English, anything. There's no reason why they should not be at home there. But if you want me to have them, the only thing that bothers me is that I don't particularly like Lady Gardiner. Rupert's bearer Anil came to clear the coffee things. It was getting late. Finally, Selina took leave. As Nadim drove, he did not say a word for a long time. The streetlights revealed the restless movements of his prominent Adam's apple. When he came near Selina's house, he said at last, Were you in love with this chap? Yes, but I never told him anything. Are you hurt? No, not hurt. Sad. Sad for you too. He opened the car door for her without wanting to come inside. He still wore the pensive look he had all evening. Selina said with apprehension, God, Rupert is not going to come between us, is he? That's up to you. It's your choice. I thought I had chosen. Thanks. Nadim took her right hand and pressed it to his lips. Before driving off, he said, Whatever might have been between two. Between you, I am all yours. Never doubt that. Selina shot a longing glance at him and ran inside. Lady Julia Gardiner descended from the Poak plain in a summer organdy frock. It had pink roses and green leaves against a white background. Nadim, Selina, and Rupert were all there to receive the Gardiners. I say, said Sir Hugh, with a twinkle in his eyes. Rupert, old chap, where have you sprung from? Ah, Selina, didn't I say your country had possibilities? Rupert took Lady Gardiner in his car, and Selina took the baronet in her blue lancer. Nadim followed in his own car. Rupert had thought it best to put up the Gardiners. As Selina had no cook, this seemed the best solution. Rupert's Bengali Christian cook was an expert hand. Lady Gardiner, who could no longer afford a cook in her Park Lane flat, was overwhelmed by the correct service rendered by these dark-skinned Bengali households. Rupert's house was bordered by a garden of unique beauty. Julia spread herself on the sofa and avidly drank the sherry offered her. Eugene had baked some scones, which she buttered generously in spite of her tendency to be obese. You get such good butter here. You get everything here, said Rupert with pride. Nadim had postponed his lunch for Rupert in order to include the Gardiners. Together they planned a good time for the baronet and his wife. Selina suggested that they should take them to Rangamati and Kaptai. They felt they all need a holiday. Sir Hugh puffed at his cigar in complete contentment, amused by his wife's bewildered surrender to the charms of Bangladesh. In fact, Julia was totally dumbfounded. She had expected a crowd of half-naked aborigines to garland her with some unknown evil-smelling coarse flower, open drains, piled up filth on mud roads. In fact, the sight of an infrastructure of modern living took her aback. She had been prepared for more chaos, more poverty and degradation than what she saw. When Nadim flashed his white smile at her, she noticed his beautiful teeth and tasteful native clothes. There was a polish about him which she had hitherto attributed only to Europeans. Selina, driving her husband, looked like a darker version of many English girls she knew. She was casually dressed in white cotton trousers and a fashionable open white and red striped coat. Rupert, driving her, had pointed towards Gulshan, saying, "That's where Selina lives." Lady Gardiner saw through the car window an exclusive residential area with houses, the like of which would be difficult to find even in London. She also admired the marble cream-coloured domes of Sir Salimullah Hall and was told that it was the largest student hostel of the Dhaka University. Rupert also pointed at the block of flats in Savage Road where Nadim lived. Brilliant man, that fiancé of Selina's. He is translating Shakespeare's Coriolanus into Bengali. Julia's blue eyes dilated in amazement. Next day was Tagore's birthday, and the Gardiners had arrived just in time. The celebrations began in Selina's house in the afternoon. The marble columns of her drawing room wore crimson blossoms of Krishnachura and wreaths made of green leaves. At the front door, in a huge earthen vase, Selina had put an exquisite bunch of pink oleanders. This gave the occasion a supremely festive look. Anandoloke. Everyone's eyes fell on the clusters of pink flowers. 3 artists sang a Tagore song in chorus. Selina had selected her favorite one. It was the song in which Tagore celebrates the music of spheres. The great wave of joy originates in the stellar bodies and envelopes the entire universe. The sun, the moon, the planets, and the constellations all sing the song of joy in unison. Rupert thought he was hearing an English hymn. The tune was so familiar. Nadim later told him that Tagore had actually used hymnical cadences in his songs. The Tagore household, particularly Indira, Rabindranath's elder brother's daughter, not only took a first-class degree in French honors, she was familiar with classical Western music which she played on the piano. Selina regretted that everyone had forgotten this unique gifted girl who had also written down all the notions of Tagore's songs. People remembered her husband Pramatha Chaudhary, the renowned writer. This made Selina doubtful about worldly fame. Rupert, Julia, and Sir Hugh all read passages from the Gitanjali. Nadim gave a short introduction to Tagore, surprising the Western guests by telling them about the homework that the poet did when he was still in his teens. He had to translate substantial passages from Macbeth into Bengali. He had to read quite a few chapters from Tasso's Gerusalemme Liberta. Gerusalemme Liberata. Tagore was the first poet to translate Eliot's Journey of the Magi, and John Donne in one of his novels. Selina recited Tagore's prose poem, Africa. It anticipated the fierce struggle that the continent would go through to retain its identity and freedom. From Selina's drawing room, Julia saw trees full of huge, odd fruits. They looked like unwanted children, too many in number, climbing over the mother's body. She looked shocked. Selina said gently, "Lady Gardener, those are jackfruits." Tagore loved them. "They have a strong smell. I could serve them if you like." "Are they a little like the Thai durian?" asked Sir Hugh. Selina answered tersely, "Perhaps." In his short speech, Nadim had touched on aspects of Tagore that the three Englishmen had never heard of. He mentioned Tagore's establishment of the first agricultural bank in Shantiniketan. It was news to them. He also spoke of the great interest that was being taken in his paintings in Australia and Hungary. Julia flew from room to room, stopping before Selina's parents' portraits done by Feroz in oil. Hugging her Siamese cats, totally transformed into a Bengali film. She confessed unashamedly, "I'm getting to like this country more and more." "What about the heat, humidity, fleas, and mosquitoes, Lady Gardiner?" Nadim teased. Julia was unvanquished. "Would you believe me? There was a big fly in my roasted chicken in London. The supermarkets are not being kept as they should, I reckon." Lady Gardiner shook with horror as she remembered the fly in London. It was twice the size of the Bengali ones. It was right inside the stomach of the chicken and was discovered to everyone's disgust when Sir Hugh had just summoned all his flair. As he was about to carve the roast, sitting opposite Julia at the other head of the table, thank God Julia's two nieces, Beryl and Janet, had not noticed the insect, as they were too busy tilting the soup plates elegantly with their thumb and forefinger. The soup had been cream of asparagus, Lady Gardiner's special, with basil and parsley leaves thrown in. When offered a second helping, the girls had nodded eagerly. Meanwhile, Julia had snatched off the fly with the corner of her napkin and thrown it out the window, pretending to admire the snow-covered trees outside. Beryl had burst out laughing naughtily. "Aunt Julia, I can't imagine you admiring nature in the middle of your soup." "It is nature of a different kind," Sir Hugh had ventured to comment. "Hugh, that's positively wicked," cried Julia. "Suppose the girls had found out about the fly. How could Hugh joke when she was about to lose face?" Julia came back to the present with a sigh of relief. Although Nadim continued pulling her leg, there was a time when people thought it was the magic of Bangladesh which put people under its spell. Some people, Mughals, Afghans, Turks, never left. That's why we are such an odd mixture. Take Dominic. His surname is Pereira. Somewhere in the remote past his ancestors were Portuguese. Sir Hugh added, "No wonder so many Englishmen and women fell for this country. I believe some of them are buried here." Rupert said, "Look at your streets and roads. Minto, Bailey, Hare, Savage, Fuller. You cannot get away from the English, can you?" Sir Hugh gave a hearty laugh. "With Urdu and Armenian road, there is also an English road, which is the most un-English thing," said Selina. The evening was rounded off with an excellent Bengali dinner. Julia even forgave one or two bones, which had remained stubbornly in Selina's baked hilsha. She had used the powder given by Dominic to melt the bones, but was not totally successful. More than the baked fish, the guests appreciated the typical Bengali delicacy of hilsha, wrapped in banana leaves. Julia took a second helping of piyash. Julia took a second helping of payesh, cooked with molasses and fragrant rice. She declared, "I love your rice pudding, Selina." Talking of mosquitoes and flies, I didn't see any, Sir Hugh stated with surprise. Because Selina and Rupert's houses are heavily wired netted. You have to come to my flat to contend with them, Nadim threatened. Isn't that where we are lunching tomorrow? How about a nice and juicy mosquito surfle? Nadim. Sir Hugh nudged him good humoredly. Not a bad idea. I'll top it with a few succulent cockroaches. Selina, in the middle of swallowing a spoonful of pie, screwed her nose in disgust, crying, "Please, Nadim." Beautiful topic at meal times. You'll soon have the ladies being sick, scolded Firoz, who was wincing from the pain in his leg. He was sadder than usual because Veronica had gone home on holiday. I'll stop because we don't want a repetition of what happened last time, do we? Nadim shot a naughty glance at Selina. She colored and then threatened him with her spoon raised at him. Nadim's lunch, which included the Dean of Arts, the Provost of Rokia Hall, and the Proctor, was as usual extremely original. This time he had arranged a sit-down dinner with the table plan drawn in Chinese ink. It was kept under his favorite painting by Kamrul Hassan. He did it alone without even Selina's help. He had made a special trip to Karika to buy classy napkins. He cooked the food himself: cold cucumber soup, fish cutlets, roasted chicken with boiled beans and peas, chopped mangoes with thickened milk. He would have preferred fresh cream, but it was difficult to come by in Dhaka. Dominic served. Nadim helped him to change the plates. He had given the entire flat a clean look by spreading a lot of lace coverings all over. They were made by his mother. White flowers of all varieties made the place look like a garden. Gardenias, tuberoses, jasmines, oleanders, and even a couple of magnolias plucked from Veronica's garden had. A violin concerto by Revel was playing on the record player. Julia touched the tuberoses lovingly, saying, "Aren't these St. Joseph lilies?" "Call them what you will. Here we have another name for them, perfumer of the night. Rajanigandha," Nadim announced theatrically. Wonder of wonders, he was wearing light blue trousers and a white shirt. The provost of Rokia Hall, a sweet-natured lady who was very fond of Nadim in a motherly way, was also among the guests. She had brought a chocolate mousse which she had made herself. Although Selina had joined them at the gardener's insistence, she was a little awed by the presence of the university dignitaries. Nadim's parents had gone home 2 days earlier. The gardener boy Salam was a great help, collecting used dishes, handing drinks. The dean patted Nadim on the back and said, "I knew you are a brilliant teacher, but now I see that you are a great entertainer. Did you really cook all this?" "Yes, sir. Can I talk to the pretty girls now?" Nadim's joke was directed against the quaint duties of the proctor, who in the past had to keep an eye on the boys and the girls. To talk to each other, they had to obtain the written permission of the proctor. The couples, freely chatting and strolling together in the campus, now enjoyed a degree of freedom which was a dream in those days. "Talk to the girls as much as you like, but remember to feed me well," the proctor said with a wink. Julia pointed at the mantelpiece and asked, "Why do these flats have fireplaces? Do you have a severe winter?" "Far from it. Our winter is like your spring. This is an example of the so-called slavish mentality and unnecessary imitation of British homes. But the mantelpiece is handy. I can keep my knickknacks on it." Nadim glanced lovingly at his collection on the mantelpiece. Rupert taking out a small porcelain statue of the fat Falstaff, Nadim was overjoyed. He kissed the protruding paunch and asked, "How did you know I adored the bloke?" Rupert, pleased to find his gift appreciated, said proudly, "I can't let out all my secret sources, can I?" but take it as an inducement to translate the two parts of Henry IV. Mr. Know-all, you really knew that Shakespeare was known here? Asked Julia. I know many things, Rupert went on. Like what? Like the fact that you would fall for this place once you got here. I hope I'm not being insolent. Julia blushed, but she was not totally displeased with Rupert's remark, for she tore off a bit of some betel leaves that Nadim had procured for the proctor, who was fond of them, and put it in her own mouth. They all waited breathlessly for her reaction. She chewed the stuff slowly, closing her eyes. Then she made a face and said, It is medicinal, I think. It has a clean taste. If you were off food, you might like to chew it. Julia spelled out the result of her experiment as realistically as she could. The Dean of Arts clapped his hands, and the rest of the company joined him. The next day, the gang left for Rangamati by car. 16th November 2022. Narrated by Mehadi Hassan Anik.